Sick of sitting at your job, daydreaming about the life that you would have if you'd won that big jackpot? Do you want to design a life for yourself that you don't need to take a vacation from? Do you have a vision for your life that you just don't know how to make a reality? Next Exit Your Destiny is a witty, comical, yet straightforward guide that gives you common sense, easy to follow steps to make the life you dream of the life that you live. Get off of Unfulfilled Street, Unhappy Way, and Sunday Night Blues Boulevard and take the next exit towards your destiny today.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to Dream Building 101. I am your host, Dr. Ebony Potts, author of Next Exit Your Destiny, Taking the Road Towards the Life of Your Dreams. And if you are interested in ordering a copy, the information to order your copy of that book is in the comments. I am also the host of this channel, and on this channel, we talk to different individuals from different walks of life who are all on their path to fulfillment to give you concrete examples of how you too can follow your dreams. Don't forget that if you like what you see here today, as we are talking and you are encouraged and inspired, to go ahead and hit that subscribe, like, and share button. So today, I have the pleasure of speaking to another TCNJ, the College of New Jersey graduate and alumni, Dr. Cerrone Foster. How are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm doing great, and I am excited to be here talking with you today.
So again, I met Dr. Foster in a biology class. I'm not sure which one, back at the College of New Jersey, quite some time ago. I'm not going to date us too much, but she's always been so positive, smart, just very, very brilliant even back then. And I'm going to let her talk to you guys. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your titles are, and what you're doing at this current time.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ebony. Yes, it was definitely a pleasure knowing you and having you in biology class while we were at TCNJ. And it's just great to see, those 18, 19-year-old students coming into college and where we are now and how much we've grown. So I want to say it's really great to see all the work that you're doing and how accomplished you've done as well. I am originally from Newark, New Jersey, and so currently I am living in Tennessee, and I'm an assistant professor at East Tennessee State University, and I'm assistant professor in biological sciences. And what I do is that I'm a researcher, and so I have a research lab, and I study cardiovascular disease, particularly with a focus on women's health. And I was trained as a biochemist, so I don't work with patients or people, but I do work and look at sort of the molecular or the fine grain details of heart disease and how sex differences and hormones play a role, and particularly as women age and lose their hormones, what's the risk for cardiovascular disease? In addition to that, I also teach introductory biology. So I have lots of freshmen in my course. And that actually was sort of a role that I wasn't trained for, or that I initially thought I would be doing. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the teaching and mentoring aspect with students in my lab, service and working on some initiatives to improve science education is also a part of what I do as well.
So I just told you guys she was smart. So what was your career path once we left TCNJ, when you graduated? How did you end up where you are now?
Okay, oh good. And so after leaving TCNJ, I decided to pursue a PhD in biomedical sciences. And so I moved to East Tennessee State, or to East Tennessee, and attended the university and started working on a PhD in biomedical sciences. And initially, I was thinking that I was either going to do like a physician scientist, so I was going to do a PhD, then an MD, or that I either would go work in industry. And being from New Jersey, where we have all the pharmaceutical companies in the region, I thought that's something that I would be interested in doing as well. And so I always had been interested in science and medicine. And so I thought I'll get my PhD, 5 years, that's top, leave Tennessee and come back to New Jersey. And that was my plan. And just to note, it is going on 20 years this year that I have been
5 years, girl.
Yes, and so it's 20 years later that has unfolded. And so we'll probably talk a little bit more about that later. But after I finished my PhD, I had an opportunity, and I was doing some faith-based work with my church on cardiovascular disease and educating the community in trying to decrease the disparity and the burden of cardiovascular disease in our region. And so I really, that was my first time getting involved in that. And so I really was able to see, wow, here's how my science is even bridging with my faith and then bridging with some stuff in the community outside of just being sort of a doctor or someone that's working with patients. And so I began to sort of see that and decided to switch my research path. And so I did a fellowship in cardiovascular disease at the same universities. And then afterwards, I was like, I was kind of burnt out a little bit. And it was sort of, what am I going to do? And so I decided to take a year off and say, okay, well, I'll just teach. That was sort of my thing. Oh, I'll just teach for a year, thinking that would be an easy shot and I could just sort of have that year. But it opened up so much about sort of my passion, and what I unlocked a lot of things that I didn't know was there. And I had already taught as a graduate student that you typically have to teach. And so that was sort of my path. And even though I think it was a straight route that you go to school, you get your PhD, you do your fellowship, then you find a job. And so it was a straight route, but it unfolded into things that I had not expected or anticipated according to my plans and what I was going to do.
And that very often happens, with pretty much everyone that I've spoken to. You have this plan in mind, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And, life is not concrete, sequential the way that we would like to think it can be. Yeah. For some people, it can be in some aspects, but then, life happens to everyone, as I say. So, there's always a monkey wrench kind of thrown at you, whether it's personal or professional, or, mental, or with your relationships and things of that nature. And, you kind of have to adjust. And, all of it is really meant to kind of fine tune and narrow you into what it is that you are meant to be doing,
Yeah, I agree.
Tell us about a challenge you faced on your path, a turn back moment, if you will, and how did you overcome it?
So many things from your book. I loved it. I was like, oh, this is my story too. And so it really I resonated with me, but even reaffirmed and confirmed some things still. And so when I was going through and just thinking about some of the lessons and things that I've learned with this particular question that you just asked, I started to have some health challenges along the way. And I had always been healthy. I had exercised. I did all the things sort of right, but I started having some health challenges along the way. And so I was not at 100% capacity. So that introduction, when you talked about that awakening and that example of when you have a cold and sort of how you feel, and you're not necessarily 100, but you're 100%, but you're trying to go, that was me operating through my health challenges. And what I had to say, it is okay to take some time back. And in my field and in my research, I was worried about, oh my goodness, if I take this time back or take this time off, how far behind am I going to be from everybody else in terms of publications and grants? But it really gave me that opportunity to say, that's not important right now. And to be able to reshift and refocus and sort of see how I probably had these clenched fists on my career and all those accolades that were coming along with it, or those hoops and hurdles that you have to jump through in order to measure success. And so that is what I've learned in that time period, that when you got to take a break, you just got to take a break, and it's okay. And you can't measure yourself to all the standards and things that are around you, even though those are the things that you're going to be measured on for your promotion and for your progress. And so it was a hard pill to swallow and learn, but I had no choice. And I didn't have to take off from work per se. I still was able to work, but I had to take some downtime. You need to take a break. You need to sit down. You need to slow down. And I would hear those things all the time. You say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not doing this. They're not working on a PhD. Oh, no. So learning to listen better to people as well. But I navigated through those. But the beauty in that is that I had to slow down and take some of that time off. But in that, after it was over, in the last 3 years or so, all of it came back full circle. And so the things that I thought I was going to miss out on and miss a beat, things just started coming into play. And I did get a research grant. I did publish those papers. I'm still working on those. I was able to start my research lab, had opportunities for more fellowships and more training. And so it really was that when you got to take a break and you got to slow down, do it, and don't worry about some of those things that you're going to miss out, because God was faithful in bringing those things back.
That's a good lesson for especially women. Excuse me, as I've spoken to, quite a few women in this series. There's a lot of pressure on people in general, but there's a lot of pressure on women to perform in our society at the same level as I'm gonna, again, generalize as the opposite sex that doesn't often have the same tugs and pulls on them the way that women do. And it's so important. We're hearing a lot more about self-care nowadays. I see, self-care Saturday and those types of things, but you have to listen to your body. Your body is constantly sending you signals, and you can only ignore them for so long, before your body's going to start to break down. You don't go to the gym and stay there for 7 days. So, and your body and your mind and all of that is the same way. You cannot function optimally without taking proper rest, without taking time for yourself to just, sit back and watch, mindless TV or whatever it is that you can do to kind of unplug and recharge. Everyone needs that. So it's important. It's an important lesson for all of us to remember you cannot pour from an empty cup. So
it is
very important. What did you learn from that experience besides the fact that you definitely needed to take time from yourself? What do you wish that you knew before embarking on your path?
So one of the things that I wish I would have known earlier, and we didn't talk about that. So when I was in school, and I'm as a mentor now, very adamant of talking to my students about that, is how do you deal with sort of that mindset or the pressure to perform, but that pressure to be the best. And to have that is a healthy mindset that you want to do your best. You want to you want to achieve success, but how to have a healthy mindset about that. And it's okay if you don't get something. It's okay on how to be able to deal with rejection. And so I remember not getting a research grant that I had applied for at the second sort of phase of my career when I was in my fellowship. And I took it as, oh, this must mean that I'm not meant to have a research lab because I didn't get it. And so thinking about how I look at rejection, and that it's not necessarily an indication that no, you're not qualified or no, that you don't belong here. And so talking about healthy ways on how you look at rejection or how you look at the no's in your life, because I did not pursue that path in immediately having a research lab, because I had looked at all the statistics. I had looked at, how difficult it is to get a grant, the pressure of publication, all the negative difficulties, even though all my research mentors had been successful, even though they had a positive outlook and they enjoyed what they were doing, even though I had those around me, I was still looking at all the negatives, trying to teach my students how to deal with the rejections, how to deal with the no's, how to deal with failure as well. And I think that would have helped So I didn't immediately pursue it. I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not dealing with all of that. And it came around full circle, which I ended up doing. I was like, no, you can do this, Cerrone. You got this in the midst of my health challenge, right? And so even at a time where oh my goodness, are you crazy? Are you sure you want to do this? Knowing, you're navigating and managing this health challenge. And so even in that, I said, yes, I'm going to do it. I can do this. And so I end up getting, like I said, the research grant now. And so dealing with rejection, no failures, and what that might mean. Sometimes it does mean that you need to switch gears and do something else, but that's not always the case.
That's an important lesson for everyone, when you're on your path to whatever your individualized path is, because everyone's path is different, you're going to bump up against a no. And those no's, like you said, can mean different things depending on what's going on, what your path is, and which way, your heart and your mind and, I believe in God and which way God is sending you. And you have to kind of pay attention to that. It's often time to be still and ask for guidance. And most every time that I've asked, like, okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean? I always get an answer. What do you love the most about what you do? And what is the most challenging aspect of what you are currently doing?
Oh, good. So I went through the little career survey that you had in the book, and so I was like, okay, you know what you want to do, but it was so good because it was so on point, and it's so, like I said, it reaffirmed and confirmed. So I sat and marked off the different letters and counted them up, and when I went to look, I was like, oh yes, this is so me still. But what I love about my job is I love asking questions. I love being in the research lab, and I love working with my hands. And those are some of the day-to-day things that I just love about getting up, going to work. But in a larger sense, I love that I'm asking questions that will probe a little bit more into benefiting science and then the health of others, and particularly women, but then also the students. And so I love, and this is my theme of generational impact is my passion. And then I want to be sure that each generation is better than the next, or are not making the same mistakes, or are just expanding it and growing. And so it's really nice. And it's a nice partnership, I like to call it, with my students. But I love working with the young people, and I get to see them grow. The other part that I love, which was nothing that I intended, and so the higher education, the administrative part, that was something that I didn't think anything about. I thought I'll be in a research lab. I do science. I love science, and I love to work with people. I'll do that. But the whole policy, higher education thing, piece was something that I didn't have a background or training in at all. But I had a lot of teacher friends, and so I had to learn, because when I started teaching introductory biology, it wasn't that I just get up there and talk about science. I noticed that there were a lot of challenges and struggles that my students were facing coming out of high school into college. There were gaps and deficiencies. I work in a rural Appalachian region, and so those were some additional challenges that the school systems faced. I worked with first generation college students, so it was a lot of things that came into play, and it was like, oh, you have to figure out how to be able to help your students. And so I began working with K through 12 teachers, began working with individuals who work in higher ed that are not necessarily in the classroom, but they're in administration, and all of us coming together with our different backgrounds on how do we make this the best higher ed learning experience for our students. That has been a really good developing passion of mine, and another thing that I do love about what I do. Completely unexpected that I love all of those things, but it's how do I marry them all together? How do I balance all of that? So it has been sort of a challenge, and I'm growing and I'm learning, and I'm asking people that are senior to me about how to navigate all of that. So I think that has been the challenge. But I remember an advisor or a mentor, he said, Cerrone, you have one piece of the puzzle to fix. You do not have to answer all the questions, fix all the questions, and do everything. You got one little piece of the puzzle to fix in your journey here, and be okay with that. So that's something I keep reminding myself.
That is good advice because, you can't do all of any of it all at one time. So kind of, giving yourself a break, allowing yourself to say, okay, take a breath, just one thing at a time. And that is a good lesson no matter what stage you're at and what level of development you're at. If you could tell someone out there who may just be getting on their path, a lot of people who tune in are career switchers, because everybody that's watching this or that may encounter this is not a college student, but you have people who, reach a certain level and just like, okay, this is not for me. I need to, find a new path. How do I get there? What would you say to this or these individuals?
I would say, and again, you mentioned this in your book, of sitting down and assessing and doing an inventory, asking yourself hard questions about sort of what's my passion, what do I enjoy. One of the things that keeps me motivated is kind of what problem or what thing am I going to solve or contribute to this. And so really digging deep and asking yourself questions and getting to know yourself. That would be the first thing. I journal a lot. And so every day I'm putting my thoughts out. I'm inspecting myself and my motivations and passions. So I would say really take some time and do that. The other thing is go for it. It's just go out and do some things and not have such clenched fists. If I could use that term, because things may come to pass as you are actually walking along the path. And so even though it might not be figured all out, take those initial steps, do your homework. It doesn't mean that you don't have faith in God or you're not trusting God, because you're planning and you're finding some reasonable solutions. So don't be afraid to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I might not be qualified for this, so I might not. You'll never know if you don't actually do it. And that's the whole thing of that lesson of, okay, being okay with the rejection, because that's all that you can get. As if you apply and you try and you do something and you fail. Okay, you failed, now what? Go the next step. Your next journey or your next step or your path might be because of that failure. And so if you don't take that step and you don't fail, you might be missing out on what's next, because I think sometimes in failure we don't realize that's another opportunity for self-assessment.
Self-assessment is extremely important. When you hit those closed doors or things of that nature, a lot of times people will get stuck in the woe is me, this is so terrible, I've been doing this for so long, and why, and it's okay to have a moment of that, but after a while, okay, life, you're still here, so there's still purpose for you, there's still something that the Lord wants you to do, there's still something that God has for you, and it's your job to figure it out. Anything else you want to add, or any questions for me?
I know this has been great. Like I said, I definitely loved your book. And so I'm sure you probably have gotten a lot of questions, and I have looked at some of the videos about sort of your passion and sort of what made you write the book. So, but I want to know this concept of moving on, right? Sometimes we are afraid to move on. And so can you talk a little bit more about sort of your journey, or what sort of helped you in that process of moving on to the next step, not necessarily staying in sort of that same thing you were trained to do from the beginning, but moving on to some additional things? What was sort of the motivator or the push that really got you to do that in terms of writing the book and this podcast or these video shows and everything else?
Well, for me, like I said in some previous interviews, I was told to write a book quite some time ago. I wasn't necessarily being obedient with what I felt like, I was being tugged on to do, or what I felt like the Lord was leading me to do. I made excuses, and we all have been there. Oh, I'm not a writer. What am I supposed to write about? I don't have time. All of those things, and I use those as kind of justifications to not do what I felt like I was being led to do. And eventually I hit a brick wall. I kind of felt like I was going in one direction, and I was going in that direction, not necessarily because it was in my heart to go in that direction, but I was going in that direction because it was the next logical step. Always love working with students. And I'm sure, as you can attest to, I love working with students. I love watching their growth. I love working with teachers, but there were aspects of what I was doing that were starting to kind of take away from what I had initially fell in love with doing, as far as part of what I was doing with education. What is it that I'm supposed to do? How am I supposed to proceed? What's my next step? And all I kept hearing was like, hey, hello, I told you to write a book. Like I told you a long time ago to do this. And I'm like, okay, but I'm still kind of, you didn't answer my question. This is my question. And, you're telling me to do this, but that's not really answering my question. I didn't quite see, I couldn't see it, because you're too close to it. So eventually, I decided to be obedient. I started writing a book, and it flowed in a way that I just did not expect. My motivation has never really been about really glorifying me. It just really wasn't my motivation. My motivation was that, okay, there's some information here that I think could help someone. And help motivate others to fulfill their dreams and really get to where they need to be, because they may have been struggling just like I was at that moment. And, this is what I could put out there. And I think that, if I can get it to the right people, perhaps, who knows what could come from that. So getting the information out there, and I said, okay, well, again, having the education background, knowing that people need examples. It's one thing to read something in a text, but it's a whole nother thing to hear someone say something that might, jive with your spirit, or, oh, I went through that, or, you just never know when you're going to hear something, or you're going to see something that can help propel you. So I wanted to pair it with speaking to people like you, and people that I've spoken to previously, and people that I'll speak to after you, to kind of, again, go along with information that can kind of help motivate people. So where can anyone who's watching get in contact with you? What's your web address, your Instagram, email? Where can people reach you?
So Twitter probably would be a really good place where I have a lot of things that I'm doing in education and science, and can easily find me there. My handle is at Dr. _ Cerrone, Cerrone. That's one place. My website is kind of long, but you can find me if you look at ETSU Biology, Cerrone Foster. You could easily find me there. As well as, I can give you my email. It is cerronefoster@gmail.com. But any of those three places, you can easily find me there.
Well, I have enjoyed this, and if you guys have enjoyed it as well, go ahead. Don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Thank you so much for your time. And I know that something that you said today is going to help someone who's listening. So thank you again on behalf of those who are watching.
And thank you for having me. This has been really great. I love the book. I love all that you're doing. And as a fellow educator myself, I'm definitely encouraged by your path, and now how you're using it to still motivate and inspire others. And so all the best to you, Ebony.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foster. I appreciate it. All right, guys, again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have been inspired to continue along your path. God bless, and see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.